Hello and welcome. Today is day 3 of the Path to Home Ownership, where today we will be speaking with none other than Kyla Settle from Coldwell Banker's office in Annapolis. Kyla Settle, she is the branch vice president there and will be giving us some insider tips on why it's so important to have realtor guidance when you are purchasing property. And so we'll go into a lot of great topics. If you've ever been considering or thinking about home ownership, this is going to be a really great, important conversation that you want to be a part of. So please tag a friend if you know someone who's been considering it, and let them know that we are live. We're going to wait for some people to come in. We're going to bring Miss Kyla Settle in so that we can get started with this topic. It's really important, especially in today's market where we're seeing so many changes happening very rapidly. So we want to jump in and get started with that. So let's pull Miss Kyla in. Yes. Hello. Hello. Thank you for joining
Hi,
us.
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I'm so excited that we'll get a chance to have this conversation today. I'm really excited about the topic. I think homeownership is something that everyone should get to experience at some point in their
For
life. So,
sure.
so I think, today is going to be a really great opportunity to get some questions answered for people who may not even know, why it's important to have representation when you're going through the process of purchasing property, and some of the pitfalls that you can get into, and why it's important to have someone that's on your in your corner. So I wanted to let some people join in, but we've got about 5 people, so I say let's get going.
I'm all for it. Let's do it.
So do you mind letting the people know who you are, what you do, and why you do it?
Yes. So my name is Kyla Settle. I'm coming into my 8th year of real estate, which is hard to believe how quickly it's gone by. I was previously a public affairs advisor and a communication strategist for Department of Defense, and I had a host of other positions in the communications industry. Very proud of that. Um, I came into real estate because, first of all, I loved properties. I was obsessed with looking at property, home decor, interior design. And while it seems like it's going to be fun, and that's what you're going to be talking about, there's so many other layers to this industry
Right.
that you discover as you get in it. But I am currently the branch vice president of the Coldwell Banker Realty in downtown Annapolis, as well as the Crofton location. So I have the pleasure of
Nice.
manning 2 offices in 2 different markets. I do it because I love it. I'm just crazy enough to love it. Real estate is different every single day. You learn something with every transaction. And at the heart of it, you get to usher a client through one of the most important decisions they'll ever make. Um, and as a manager, I'm not in production anymore, but I have the pleasure of working with so many talented agents such as yourself. And so I get to live vicariously through you guys and all the ups and downs. But it's just exciting, and it just brings a new set of problems to solve every day. And I really do enjoy that part.
I love that. Well, thank you again for joining us. We're going to get
Thank
right
you.
into it. These are some questions that I know people are probably thinking, but have never asked a professional out loud.
Hmm.
Um, so, is there ever a perfect time to buy?
That's such a good question, because the perfect time to buy a house is when you are prepared to buy it, when your finances are in order, when you've saved up money for down payment and closing costs, potential fixes that you may want to personalize the property, um, accounting for inspections, property inspection, and appraisal. When you have the funds set aside and you know you want to take on the responsibility of home ownership, then that's a perfect time to buy. As far as the market goes, we could all be paid lots of money, millions of dollars, if we could predict the market and how we were going to, gain equity and what period of time. But the reality is there's no real way to do that. And so we need to make sound decisions that work for the lifestyle that we want to live and that put us in a comfortable place for ourselves financially. So that's when it's a good time to buy.
Right. Not when someone's pressuring you to, but when it actually
Right.
makes sense so that you can keep the
Yes.
home that you get.
Bingo. Because getting in it and then figuring out you got to spend $500 a month on landscaping is not fun. Like, you want to
No.
account for all of those expenses. And
Exactly.
sometimes we get in a little bit further than we'd like, but we make it work.
Would you say, in your opinion, in your experience, what would you say is something that most buyers regret in terms of waiting too long?
Oh goodness, the price.
Okay.
I think all day long we could look back the last even 4 years or 5 years since COVID, and you can see in the mid-Atlantic an incremental increase in prices that averages about 5% a year. So if
Wow.
I were to just project that out to next year and the following year, uh, I'm not doing anything but paying more. Now, again,
Mhm.
if you're not prepared to buy, that's one thing. But
Right.
if you are prepared to buy, you're responsible and you're financially sound, what are we waiting for? Because ultimately you're going to be paying more later.
Mm.
I think there's a myth that we are going to experience this great housing bubble that we saw in 2008 when I was not in real estate. I don't know if you were, but at that time we could kind of reflect back to some of the parameters that were in place as far as lending, what types of loans they were doing, and just a lack of checks and balances to ensure that buyers were really qualified for these houses. So that
Right.
produced a real bubble that we're not seeing today. You and I both know that we have lenders that are vetting buyers right up to the day of settlement. They are doing
Right.
employment checks and making sure those finances are in order. So for the people who think the bottom is just going to drop out, you really have to be in touch with your local market, because the national headlines are one thing, your local market is a whole other animal.
That's true. That is so true. And I feel like people take the national news as what's going
Mm-hmm.
on in their local markets. And for one area that may be struggling, I know for this metro area, that's just not the case. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's really important. And this kind of trickles back into another question I have in terms of how does today's market compare to what buyers think is happening?
Yeah, same train of thought. They think that the national headlines apply. I think buyers are under the impression that all this inventory has come to the market and now it's a buyer's market. Well, it may be in Naples, Florida, or Austin,
Mhm.
Texas. But in the mid Atlantic, in particular, the Washington, D.C. metro, Baltimore, Annapolis regions, we are not seeing this huge influx of property hitting the market.
Mm.
And to have a balanced market would be about 6 months of supply, meaning it would take 6 months to sell every single house that was available today. Right now, we're still at one and a half, one and some change, maybe 2 months,
Oh, wow.
which is still off the mark. So what I would say to buyers is you want to look for opportunities and work with an expert, but know that your neighborhoods, highly sought after neighborhoods with very little turnover. We know many communities where it's just hard to get in there and you got to know somebody. Like, that's still happening. And as we're on
Wow.
the cusp of the spring market, it's interesting to check in with lenders and see, like, how many pre-approvals are you writing over the weekend, how many are getting approved, and of that batch, what is contained in the winning offer. Like, this is all part
Mm.
of the strategy. And so there's a little marker after Super Bowl weekend where we start to see things open up in the spring. So I'm really excited to see over the next week or two what that market is looking like. But
Right.
buyers, the influx of inventory that's readily available right now is not here, and that could be
Mm.
a real benefit to the seller who may be waiting until spring when everyone else wants to get on board to go ahead and do it now and beat the
Right.
crowd.
I love
Mm-hmm.
that. And I think this is really important because when there's not as much inventory, it ends up creating a lot more competition. And with
Yeah.
competition comes, multiple offers. So
Exactly.
how do buyers compete without overpaying?
So this is such a good question, because you're really gonna need to be open-minded. And sometimes that deal comes from the property that's languished on the market a little longer than, say, the new property that just hit this morning. So
Hmm.
be open to looking at some things that have been sitting for a while and maybe a price reduction, because sellers believe their house is worth, the
To
sky
the
is the
moon.
limit. And listen, nobody wants to sell it at that price better more than an agent, okay?
Right.
But we have to listen to the market and correct when necessary. So what I would say to buyers is if you're looking for an opportunity, look back at those
Mm,
properties that have been on 30 plus days. That's where you're going to be able to really negotiate. That's when you're going to be able to get a thorough property inspection, maybe some closing help, and your agent is really going to be able to flex a little bit. For the properties that are just hitting the market and they are in tip-top shape,
a
the
mad
kitchen is
dash.
fabulous, everybody wants that house. And here's the funny part, all the buyers are going to compete to get it because these buyers want to drop a bag and let that be the end of it. They do not want to make repairs or paint or envision something that is not there.
Right.
So be open-minded and look for opportunities in maybe the not so highly desired house, but in the great neighborhood.
Right. I love that advice, especially because I think, like you said, people rush to the hot new and now,
Mm-hmm.
but there's so much more opportunity in some of the homes that maybe
Yes.
there's a couple of things you might have to compromise, but if you can get it at a great price, that sets you up
Well
for,
worth it.
yeah, I love that. So with this, what would you say matters more? Price, interest rate, or strategy?
Oh, wow. That's such a good question because the interest rate plays a huge role into what you're going to pay over the life of the loan, right? So that's hugely important. But when we're looking at pricing and strategies, especially on opportunities where we can negotiate a bit, there could be a way that you negotiate. Um, um, oh, my lending hat. I'm not a lender, but I work with some really top ones in the country. So I'm proud of that with our GRA partners. But what I'm saying is the strategy of negotiating opportunities to buy down points,
Mm,
that could be a term that you throw into that contract where you're not only getting good pricing, but then I'm helping myself a little bit by buying down that point and the seller's paying for it through a contribution. And I'm hitting both targets at the same time. So this is where having a savvy agent and a fantastic lender comes in handy because you might have to think outside the box a little bit.
right.
So obviously with pricing, when you're doing your initial search to buyers, I would say look about 10 or 20 beyond where you really can be because
Mm,
there might be opportunity there. And if
okay.
someone says, oh, I have a $500,000 budget and here you come with a 510 house that has everything they want and then some, then we're looking at maybe a $60 increase to their mortgage payment every month. I'm willing to do that. And your
Okay.
buyer might be willing to consider that where it's like 510 is too much. Is it really? Let's run the numbers and see.
Right.
Is there an opportunity to buy down a point or get a seller contribution? Possibly. So don't let the $10,000 difference throw you off your game if we can make it work.
Right. I love that. And that's why it is so important. We had a lender on yesterday to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
some of the importance aspects of being open and honest and upfront with where you are with your finances so they can
Yes.
help you get the best approval, and you can get out there and have the best range to really give yourself some wiggle room as to where you can find. So, what would you say is the biggest misconception that first time home buyers have about the real estate market currently?
Oh goodness. First time home buyers, you gotta love them. They have a lot of imagination. They are watching every real estate show that is on television. God bless them. They want prime, pristine, and ready. And then they have parents that want to help
Right.
sometimes.
Right. That have
um,
bought years and years ago when rates
oh,
were nowhere.
yes. They bought in 94 and they have so much advice. I listen, I'm saying this all in jest. I do not want to
Yeah.
offend anyone, but we do have a special like heart for first time home buyers. And so what I would say to them is, you know, who you hire matters.
Hmm.
It's so important that you work with an agent who is really knowledgeable and patient. Because if you're working with an agent who is pushy, then you
Right.
just never feel at peace or at rest. It feels like you're being pressured into a situation that you don't know if you want to be in.
Right.
So when you're looking at a hyper local expert, it's okay to interview a few people. If you find someone on Instagram you love, look up their transactions and see what their experience is. Ask questions. Who's the brokerage that's behind them? Because that
Mhm.
matters too. Reach and access to other listings that are not public,
Right.
also helpful to you. But the biggest thing is get your ducks in a row. Call your lender. We can't go see any property if we don't have money together. So
Right. Window shopping is
pre-approval,
not.
yeah, we're not doing that. It is not in anyone's best interest for us to go out and dip and dabble, and then we find out you have no funds. Like that's
Right.
not fun. And it's not a good way to run a business. And I think, too, for buyers and sellers, understanding that realtors are independent 1099s. We are not
Mhm.
employees in that capacity. So we have to run a business as it should be. And a lot of that is good preparation, getting your finances and your lending or your proof of funds identified, and then maybe even before you officially start your search, go to some open houses and see what you like. Go do some drive-bys in communities so that we're not doing all this exploratory time when
Right.
we could have done our own little research ahead of time. So just get prepared and ask lots
Mhm.
of questions and know that the local market stats are what are going to matter to you, not the national headlines.
I love that. And what something you said really stuck out to me is having a realtor that is going to be patient and not pushy.
Yes.
And that is so important. And in my own experience, I had a couple that was considering home buying
Mm-hmm.
in the summer of last year. And it just wasn't really the right time. They were getting ready to get
Mm-hmm.
married. There was a lot of stuff going on. And sure, I could have been like, well, don't you want to be married
Don't
and
you
then
want to
go
move
right into
in?
your
And
new home?
yes.
You know what I mean? I could have had the whole script ready, you know?
Yes.
But I was like, you know what? This is probably a good time for them to really focus on something that's
Mm-hmm.
going to bring them together for a long term
Yeah.
outside of just purchasing a home. So let them focus on this. Let them really
Yeah.
be present for this moment that is really special. And then, having trust in myself that I had provided enough value
Exactly.
that they would come back. And sure enough, in August, after they got married, they came right back and they said, we're ready and we want to get going. And they bought their first home and we closed
Mm-hmm.
on it in November of last year. So
See?
congratulations to them. But
Yes.
to what you say, being patient and having
Mm-hmm.
someone who understands where you are is really important. So I'm so glad that you brought that point up.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? How should buyers think long term when choosing a home?
Excellent question. You're never going to go wrong buying the ugly duckling in a highly desirable neighborhood,
Mm,
because that property is going to hold inherent value in just the fact that people want to be there. So
okay.
if you're looking at properties, like, location matters all day long. You can fix the exterior and the interior and adjust, and Lord knows they want you to remodel your kitchen every 10 years. Who's got the money for that? But something that you want to grow in and be a part of the community. I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in the house and the exterior, and we don't
Mhm.
consider the maintenance costs. And oh my gosh, my electric bill is astronomical. What happened? Also, what's going on in the community as far as development goes? Like, these are all great things for you to consider. But location, being in a neighborhood that you love, who you are today might evolve as time passes. 5 years from now, your kids might be gone. I'm an empty nester now, so that will also play into where you can see yourself in a few years. And we live in a market that's very transient, and it's not unusual to turn over every 3 to 5 years. It's very normal in this market. And so when you're buying, are you buying in a place where people are going to want to live? Are you going to be able to
Mhm.
sell that house when it's time? Is it a good investment property should you move on but want to rent it out?
Right.
Um, are the materials good quality? Because, that's also a big deal. And you can fix that, but those are things to consider as well.
And
And
this.
and neighbors matter. If you are looking at a house and let's say you've got a little bit of land around you, I always used to tell clients, please look at it on Google Maps,
Mm,
use the satellite feature, and zoom out, because I want to see. And it's different for every property, but I can remember one couple specifically where they were like, we love this, we want to see it immediately. And I was like, here's a link, I want you to zoom out and then tell me how you
right.
feel. And they were like, thank you so much, because I don't want to see that. And if we'd gotten all the way there, I would have been very upset. And see,
Right.
again, running a business, being efficient with our time.
Yes, and it's so important. And, that's why it's so important to have representation that really
Mm-hmm.
cares and that's tapped into not
Yes.
only your needs, but kind of almost anticipating some of the things that you may not have even thought about. So
Exactly.
that's amazing. So I want to get into a few myth busting
Mm-hmm.
questions. These are things that maybe people have always heard, or maybe they've thought about but didn't really think to inquire with a professional.
Right. They just assume. Yes.
So, is it better to wait for rates to drop or buy and refinance later?
That's a great question. If you wait for the rates to drop, then more people will join the market because they can afford it and the rates are lower. So the myth is when the rates drop, then I'll buy, but everyone else is also buying. So what are you doing? Competing with all those other buyers. And what does that do? Drive up the
Raise the
price. So
price.
you're right back where you started. So when it's time and you've got the money, go. Don't wait for rates. Just do what you can do. And your lender is someone you can keep in touch with. So when the rates come
Right.
down and you refinance, they will tell you if it makes sense to go through that process or not. There's a break point where the math makes sense.
hmm One of the financial planner we met with was the
Mm-hmm.
first one we had, and she brought up the term of marry the home, date the rate.
Yeah, we can
So,
date. We can date the rate all day. And
hmm
and there's no way for us to predict, especially in the current market, when the rate will drop.
right.
But do you want the price of the home to creep up? Because if we're already projecting a 5% increase in the price, how much are you really saving if the rate drops and you're competing? So it's just I always believe in doing the math fully. We can assume all day, but when you see the numbers on paper, and that's a great reason to call a lender, is so that they can do the math with you, because that's
Right.
where it starts to really get clear.
I hope people are taking notes because you are dropping some wonderful gems
I'm
today, and I'm
trying.
so grateful.
I'm trying.
So next, I would say, how much negotiation power do buyers really have right
Mm,
now in today's market? Because I know it's very different from what it was just even last year. And
very true. And I would
Mhm.
say that depends on the property. It
Okay,
really does. It does depend on the property. So if I'm a seller getting ready to go, I'm taking care of the honeydew list and then some. I am getting everything, the HVAC people to do a service. I'm having the roofer come out and tell me my roof is okay. I'm going from top to bottom to make sure that I have managed and fixed and hugged every piece of my house, because the more you do on the prep for the listing, the less likely you are to linger on the market or have
Mhm.
potential issues that come up during a property inspection. And your house is that much more appealing to a wider pool of buyers.
Okay.
I think that, we there's so many things to do, but I would say in this market, you just want to be prepared, whether you're on the buy side or the list side. It's always
Mhm.
good to get everything prepared and be, ready to face what your market is at that time, because it could also change on a dime. You
Right.
could be 6 months from now and it's a different market. And that goes
hmm
back to the local expert as well, because we're tracking all of this for buyers and sellers.
And some of that could be with negotiating power. You know how sometimes they say, "Well, we're in a buyer's market,
Yeah.
or we're in a seller's market." And what does that typically mean for someone who's not in the industry, doesn't really know the lingo with that?
So when a buyer's market, that goes back to the 6 months of supply conversation. So negotiating power for a buyer would mean we have so much supply that sellers are trying to give their house away.
Okay.
And if we think back to 2009, 10, 11-ish, we saw a lot of properties flooding the market during that financial crisis because they had overpaid, overextended themselves, had the no doc loans. So you go on a cul-de-sac and see 10 houses and six of them have for sale signs and there's short sales and foreclosures and all kinds of things happening. That would be an abundance of inventory. And
Okay.
in that market, you would see a seller go, I will give you my first child if you buy my house by June 1st. And they're just giving stuff away. Like, I'll replace the carpet. And they've got all this stuff in the remarks on MLS, which kind of seems wild to even think
Right.
about today. But that would be an extreme example of a buyer's negotiating power. In this market today, I would say, again, looking for opportunities when you're not chasing the shiny penny that just hit the market.
Okay.
Some of the ways that buyers can really look for closing assistance or lending programs, which I'm sure your lender probably covered, opportunities for
Mhm.
down payment assistance, making the deal as seamless for the seller as possible. And
Mhm.
there's creative ways that we can maybe, negotiate parts where we may have a rent back for that seller at a
Okay.
nominal fee. And that makes it really appealing without us overextending ourselves financially. So again, that expert realtor is going to be able to help you think outside of the box to make your offer the most attractive while also meeting your needs and getting you the best deal that they can.
I love this. You were just so great. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
I have one last question, and I think this, obviously will be really helpful to people who are considering buying and have maybe been on the fence.
Yeah.
But what advice would you give to someone who feels priced out?
Oh, that's such a good question. And it's easy to feel priced out in this market because the living expenses in general are just astronomical.
Hmm.
If you're feeling priced out, I would say you're there for a reason, and there's a couple things you can do to increase your income. Now, I'm not a big hustle culture fan, even though I like to hustle and have multiple streams of income, but I don't think that that's always healthy.
Right.
But what I will say is manage the things that you can control and be patient with yourself.
Hmm.
Because if it's a matter of, in order for me to do this, I need to make this, then having a conversation with a financial professional or a lender is going to put you on pace to achieve it. It's not a
Right.
no, it's a not now.
Hmm.
So give yourself time and make a plan. And then the pricing thing becomes something that you can work toward and save, because we forget we can save,
Hmm.
and we are consumers and we don't always have money being put aside. But when you come up with a plan and you give yourself the time to actually execute it, then the reward is you'll be able to purchase the property.
Yes. This has been amazing. If
Thank
there's
you.
anyone in the chat that has questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box. We'd love to answer any questions live if you have any. Obviously, save this. This live will be available to you. Hey, Gary. He's
Hi, Gary.
he's in our my same brokerage in
Yes.
Alexandria. And yeah, I would just say for those of you who have really been considering and thinking about it, connecting with a professional, even if it's not me, which
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't recommend, but if it's not me, getting with someone who can really help you and guide you through the process of home ownership, because
Yes.
it is something that is extremely rewarding. And when you make a plan and you
Mm-hmm.
have professionals in your corner and a team to help guide you through, then it is a lot more possible than what it may
For
seem.
sure.
So I just want
Yes.
to say again, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Tiffany. I'm so
Yes.
glad you invited me. This has been the greatest. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Hopefully, we can do this again. I just want to let everyone know that the final day of our Path to Homeownership IG series will be tomorrow with none other than Kiana Williams from TSB Title. And we're
Yes.
going to be talking about closing and all things closing and making sure that you actually can get that home and walk in and have those
Yeah.
keys. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. So hopefully you all join us again tomorrow at 12 Eastern Standard Time. Thank you again so much,
Thank
Kyla. I really
you.
appreciate you,
Thank
and we
you,
will
guys.
be in contact soon.
All
You all
right.
have a
Bye,
great rest of your
Tiffany.
day.
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.